Hi, welcome to this week's episode of The Point. I'm your guest host, Jimmy Dore. We've got a great show lined up for you today. Let's go ahead and meet our panel, okay? Sitting next to me is Alexis Garcia, a producer with the right-leaning online news and commentary television network PJTV, which I've actually been over there, and as well as a columnist for Fox News Latino, and she's appeared on a little show called The Young Turks. Let's meet Alexis. Hi, Alexis. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Next to her is David Rubin, a stand-up comedian and host of Six Pack Radio on SiriusXM, which also happens to be one of the top comedy podcasts on iTunes. Congratulations.
Does anyone know what a podcast is? I have no idea, but that sounds good, so thanks for having me.
Okay, I think people know what podcasts are now. By now.
Okay.
Next to you is Desi Doyen, a producer for the Brad blog, as well as the co-host of the Green News Report, which is syndicated on radio stations around the country. Check your local listings. Welcome. Thanks for coming.
Thanks. Glad to be here.
So we got 3 great points this week. We're going to hear from Greg Palast, investigative journalist, who's going to tell us all about the shenanigans that have been going on with the Republicans' efforts to suppress the vote in parts of the country, plus Condoleezza Rice. It's a big day. She got accepted into Augusta, right? Isn't it great? And they ended their decades-long policy of refusing admission to war criminals. Isn't that nice? That's supposed to be funny. That was funny. Okay, so let's go. But first up, our first point, we're going to talk about the latest breakout of foot and mouth disease from Representative Akin from Ohio. Now, he's famous, of course, for inventing the Akin diet, which is where you lose weight by eating your horribly offensive words. Another joke. I'll be pointing these out, and I'll be lighting a firecracker off after the jokes later on. So, well, let's hear what he had to say. Congressman Akin from Ohio, here's what he said that caused all the firestorm.
What about in the case of rape? Should it be legal or not?
Well, you know, people always want to try and make that as one of those things. Well, how do you slice this particularly tough sort of ethical question? It seems to me, first of all, from what I understand from doctors, that's really rare. If it's a legitimate rape, the female body has ways to try to shut that whole thing down.
Okay, so there he is introducing us to the term legitimate rape, which I guess illegitimate rape depends on what she's wearing. I don't know. So let's ask our first question. You know, Alexa, I don't understand why it's causing such a big firestorm, because it's not really that much different than the Republican Party platform, which also criminalizes abortion, correct?
Yeah, the Republicans do have a very strict anti-abortion platform, but it's causing such a firestorm because it's just so freaking ignorant. I mean, you can't watch that without cringing. And apparently Akin got together with Michelle Bachmann, apparently, and they've been studying together. But yeah, I mean,
studying.
It's good to know as a woman. I have this defense mechanism, like a vagina dentata, apparently. Depending in there, who knew? So, but no, I think just because obviously we're in a very important election, and you know, poor Mitt Romney, he's done everything he can to talk about the economy and talk about jobs. And when the Republicans get off message and start talking about some of these social issues, it's just backfiring on them, and especially the women vote. They need the women vote, and this was just completely ignorant.
So let me, how prevalent is this in Republican circles, this kind of thinking?
I mean, you have a small, very fraction of the wingnut fraction, I guess is what you would call, but you know, a lot of young conservatives like myself, they don't want to be talking about these issues. It's so far away from what people actually believe and what's actually based out there in science. So, you know, it's unfortunate that, you know, Akin actually said what he believed, but I don't think his view is a mainstream of the Republican Party.
Good, you want to jump in?
Well, I just wanted to say the wingnut faction, I've never actually heard of that, but that's actually, I believe in that. I've always been waiting for someone to say that, so that's nice. Also, I thought this whole thing was about Clay Akin. So thank you guys for showing the video. Now that I have that cleared up, now some of this is making a little more sense. I mean, what are they drinking? What are the Republicans drinking? You know, weeks ago, we're arguing about gay people and fried chicken. Then we're having this legitimate rape argument. Now we got some guy in the Dead Sea swimming naked. What's happening to them? I mean, something is going on. I don't know what it is. As a comedian, I like it, but for the nation, it may not be the best.
Go ahead, Desi.
I think what's happening is they're finally letting their freak flag fly. They're showing everybody really what it is that the Republican Party platform is about. I mean, on Think Progress, they have a great chart where they compare the Republican GOP platform with Ryan and Romney's agenda, and also with the bills that Akin has signed his congressional record as a representative in Missouri. And they match. You know, they're against the same things. They're very in favor of controlling women's reproductive choices. So that's the most important thing to them, because that's what they've been focusing on for the last 2 years, and people are seeing that now.
Go ahead, you were saying.
Well, I just, you know, look, we are the men on the panel, as far as I can tell, and I did not know that women have some sort of force field around their uterus, because that seems to be what he's implying. There's some sort of defense mechanism. I mean, I guess, did you guys know that? Is that a factual? Maybe I missed that episode.
Did not know that was a built-in function.
It's not just with female humans, it's all animals. Like, remember when Bob Barker used to say, please help prevent your pet from being impregnated, get him spayed, neutered, or raped. Remember that? Yes. So, but isn't this? I want to shift the discussion, and you're the nicest Republican I've met in 10 years, so we're going to be nice to you. And I want to ask, but it seems to me there's a parallel universe that happens, right? Like climate change doesn't exist. Barack Obama spent $200 million on a trip to India. So there seems like now there's this in the Republican platform, abortion, even in rape and incest, is now illegal. Right, so it seems like there's this other universe that even most Republicans like yourself don't agree with, but it seems to be prevalent. It's like mainstream Republicanism now. So do you want to talk to that, or?
I would say it's completely mainstream, but I think to your point, I mean, I see this more as an exercise in message discipline. And I think the ironic thing about this, you know, you had Mitt Romney, who was running for Senate in Massachusetts. He was a supporter of abortion rights. And just to kind of see how he needed to kind of move to the right to win a primary.
But he's not coming back, right? He's supposed to etch a sketch.
Well, the thing is though, you saw the GOP though jump on Akin right away for these boneheaded comments. They want him to drop out of the race now. Whether I think that's a little bit politically motivated, because they basically had a guaranteed pickup in the Senate. That's now in question.
Yes.
This is now putting Missouri in jeopardy for Romney, who needs to win that state to become president in November. But you know, I think with some of these issues, I think you're seeing a little bit of backlash, and I do think, you know, maybe it's like we were saying, we want to talk about jobs, we want to talk about the economy. That's the #1 issue to voters, but we keep getting pulled off. We're talking about fried chicken. We're talking about putting a pill between our legs. You know, it's just, it's not good discipline, and hopefully Romney can use this and get back to his message on the economy, because that's where he's strongest.
Well, isn't that the case, though, that they can't run away from it because it's actually their positions? I mean, Paul Ryan has it in his budget. He H.R. Bill 3 was where he and Akin also co-sponsored a bill that used the term forcible rape. And there turns out there's an actual term called consensual rape. Yeah. Which I think that's an oxymoron. I don't know. How does that? Are you sleeping? How does that happen? When is there?
The whole thing is so confusing. I mean, look. Right now, Akin has 2 guys defending him. He's got Steve King, who maybe is suffering from just a mild fever or something, right? I don't know what's going on with him. And then the other guy, Mike Seaver from Growing Pains, Kirk Cameron. So if you have Kirk Cameron defending you in 2012, something is not right. If he's your staunch ally. The interesting thing is that the whole GOP is not falling into place with this. I mean, if this was the old school GOP, Akin would have dropped out because they would have forced him to drop out. So if they're not listening to Romney, if they're not listening to the head of the party and the party leaders, that tells you what the general state of the party is. Right. Well, there is like a insurgent, the Tea Party wing of that. They're like anti-establishment, and so I think Akin sees himself as one of those guys. So that when the establishment tells him to get out, he's not going to get out. And it didn't hurt him in Missouri, by the way. Like, he's still polling almost exactly the same way. So he knows his constituency. I think, you know. Let's remember, and is this going to hurt the Republican Party? Let's remember, half the country lives south of Missouri. Yeah. So let's keep that in mind. I don't think it's going to hurt him that badly. Maybe the uterus force fields are all in the South. I mean, I don't know.
But the Republicans are supposed to believe in personal freedom, but it seems like only from the waist up, right? As a woman, they say that women this is going to turn women against the Republican Party, but like, this is going to be the thing that all the hundreds of bills that they've already passed this year about transvaginal ultrasounds and defunding Planned Parenthood. Like, they want government small enough to defund Planned Parenthood, but still big enough to round up all the abortion doctors.
Right. They're not actually against big government at all, because, you know, when you ask about, well, do you support, say, an exception for rape or incest? That's, you know, a really good litmus test to see just how intrusive you want your government to be, that you won't even give a break to somebody who's been raped or has had the unfortunate consequence of being a victim of incest. You know, those That's actually fairly big government right there to want to intrude on that kind of decision for anybody.
Yeah.
But you know what I find really surprising about all of this is the science illiteracy of it. You know, Todd Akin is on the science committee, the House Science Committee.
He's
I mean,
on the science committee.
That has authority over some of our most important scientific institutions. You know, like NOAA and NASA and the Department of Energy. You know, nuclear warheads, things like that. And then this guy doesn't even understand the basics of human reproduction. And yet he's making policy decisions and funding decisions on scientific research.
He may have just skipped biology, so maybe we can grant him that. He skipped biology, did some of the other
he's
science
also
stuff.
a climate change denier.
Yes.
And, you know,
So-
like much of the litmus test that's required of membership in the Republican Party right now is to deny science.
But I think that's why you see such a growing number of people registering as independents, as unaffiliated. Myself, I mean, I look at my mom, she's a lifelong Republican. She's going to register unaffiliated because
of stuff
you have
like
some
this.
of these silly things like this that, you know, and women aren't one-issue voters. You know, yes, abortion rights are important, but, you know, women, as much as anybody else, we look at economy, healthcare, jobs, you know, so it's just a shame that this is becoming the dominant focus of conversation when we have so many important, we have, what, 8% unemployment rate?
Well, that's what they're saying, yes. 25 million people out of jobs.
Well, see, I think it's important that we actually talk about these things. I think it's important that people understand what Republicans stand for. They need to know what they're getting. And if they don't talk about these things and then they show up like the House Republicans did over the last 2 years and spend almost the entire time on abortion, you know, if they talked about that in 2010, maybe people would realize, I'm not that interested. I want to work on jobs and the economy. And now they're talking about that. So that's what people are focused on because that's what they're focused on.
I agree. I think they're trying to find a social wedge issue, and maybe because the polling on gay, which is always their great wedge issue, maybe because the polling has shifted and Obama lost no black voters when he said he was for gay marriage, and that's what everyone's saying, he's going to lose all the black voters now. Well, but because it's not the wedge issue, they're going to rape. I mean, think about that. That's what they're doing. They're looking for something, and well, we better, rape sounds good. I mean, who comes up with this?
You know, it's funny that Republicans have decided that corporations are people. They're just not sure on women yet. Right? So let's just go, one last question before we go to the break. What effect do you think this will have on the election?
You know, I think it's going to be, honestly, I think it's going to kind of backlash a little bit. I think voters out there, I think there's a lot of campaign fatigue, but we've seen some of these social issues come up with gay marriage, with abortion, with birth control. I think voters are just tired of it. I think maybe the Democrats are overplaying their hand a little bit, and I think hopefully eventually we'll get back to where people are most concerned about having a job and being able to take care of their family and put food on the table.
I actually don't think this will affect the election that much. A, we've got to get about 3 months, but B, if you're interested in social issues and women's rights and gay rights and most human rights and things like that, you really have to vote Democratic or vote Libertarian or you know, anything else. So I don't think that this in itself is going to be a seismic shift that's going to move anything even one way or another. It's good to talk about, and we have to address these issues that they don't believe in science, but in terms of actually tangibly changing the election, I don't think so.
Yeah, I would tend to agree that I don't think it'll change the presidential election actually at all. I think most people have probably already decided which way they're going to go with that. It might have an effect, though, on the Senate race. As Alexis said, that kind of was going to be a win for Todd Akin in the Senate, and that could, you know, help Republicans move towards having majority in the Senate. But
we'll see. I think it's a lose-lose. If he wins, it's a lose because that's all they're going to talk about, and if he loses, it's a lose. So that's it for this topic. Great discussion. We'll be right back after this break. We're going to talk about voter suppression. Hi, welcome back to The Point. I'm this week's guest host, Jimmy Dore, and right now we're going to turn our attention to all the stuff that's been going on all over the country to purge the voter rolls of eligible voters. Here's a video from Greg Palast talking about it.
My name is Greg Palast. I'm an investigative reporter and the author of the forthcoming book, Billionaires and Ballot Bandits, How to Steal an Election in 9 Easy Steps. Back in 2000, I discovered that Katherine Harris, Secretary of State of Florida, had knocked off tens of thousands of black folk off the voter rolls. She called them felons, but their only crime was voting while black. My point is, that game ain't done. The blackouts continue, and it's going way beyond Florida. In Colorado, 1 in 5 voters have been removed from the voter rolls. I bet you didn't read that in your paper of record. And what do you think their color was? In New Mexico, thousands of voters removed, 89% voters of color. The purge continues, the games continue, and that's my point. For more information, go to ballotbandits.org.
Wow, okay, so thanks, Greg. Greg, if you could try to be more intense in your videos. Maybe look more of a steely-eyed look into the camera. All right, so he brings up some good points. Let's talk about it. Is this really happening, and what's the effect?
Yes, it's really happening. This is something that since the 2010 elections, when Republican legislatures came into the majority around most of the states, they have instituted all of these new voter suppression laws, and I can't call them anything else. Over at bradblog.com, this is our specialty. This is what we look at. We examine voting and election issues. And photo ID restrictions, restricting early voting, voter registration purges of the voter registration polls, legal voters being purged from the rolls because they didn't respond to a mailing from the Secretary of State's office, or because their name, as Greg Palast mentioned, happened to match the name of somebody or be close to the name of a felon at some point in Florida history. All of these different laws that are being passed, you have to look at the effect of them. They say that the purpose is one thing, but the effect is actually another. The effect is to make it harder for legal voters to vote.
Let me ask you this question, though. If you need a voter ID, if you need a picture ID to cash a welfare check, shouldn't you have the voter ID to vote?
Well, first of all, we should call it photo ID. These are photo ID restrictions. Federal law, the Help America Vote Act of 2002, already requires a voter ID. For first-time registered voters, the first time you show up to vote, you have to show something. It doesn't have to be necessarily a picture ID. It can be a utility bill. It can be a bank statement. It can be anything with your name and address on it. What we're talking about are narrowly targeted, very specific laws that require very specific kinds of photo ID that are government issued. So, on the one hand, yes, we already require a voter ID. We don't necessarily need to require a specifically targeted kind that academic studies have shown millions of voters in the United States who are legal voters don't have that specifically narrowly targeted kind of photo ID.
Dave, why do you think this hasn't become a bigger issue? And why do you think the mainstream media hasn't really made it an issue?
Yeah, I think because it's sort of a boring issue. It's not sexy. It's not about legitimate rape or gay chicken and all that stuff. It's about voting. And I think people do feel incredibly disenfranchised, especially this time around, because 4 years ago it was about hope and change. And now it's either about, Romney corporate evil, or maybe a little more hope and change, or forward, or which direction is it again that we're going in? And the thing to me, though, that's the most important part of this is that Election Day should be a national holiday. We should not have to work that day. I mean, everyone should get off that day, because people can't vote sometimes, especially with minorities and lower income people. They can't vote because they can't get off work. The most important thing you can do as an American is vote and express your...
So isn't this really a failing of the left? Because we saw what happened in 2000 with the Bush v. Gore, and then so they're not. I mean, we knew this was happening 2 years ago. It seems like Eric Holder only got the memo a couple of months ago.
Yeah, well, Eric Holder's done a lot of stuff that has not gone quite right, and he's paying for it now.
Let me get just with this. Now, you follow this a lot closer than most of us, so why do you think Eric Holder didn't do something about this earlier?
I think that they were sort of slow on the uptake with that. I don't think they really expected it to be quite, not quite as aggressive as they should be about this. Now, Holder has given several speeches saying we are going to do this, and the DOJ, the Department of Justice, has gone through in states like Florida and Pennsylvania and Ohio and tried to stop these voter purges from happening, especially because these are in states that have a pre-clearance because of past voter suppression tactics. They had to sign an agreement with the Department of Justice that they wouldn't try to do this again. And so now they have to get pre-cleared every time they want to try to do further voter suppression. And so the DOJ's trying to get in there. I think they could be a lot more aggressive. I also blame the media for accepting at face value the idea that there's something called voter fraud, voter impersonation fraud, which is actually virtually non-existent.
Okay, so Alexis, let me ask you now, how do you feel about this issue?
No, I mean, well, I think you see Eric Holder starting to get involved now because we're a few months from the election. But I think it's a difficult issue because you do have instances of voter fraud. I don't think it's as widespread, maybe, as it blowed up. But there needs to be a balance. But I mean, you had in Indiana, the Supreme Court upheld their voter ID law, and you had Justice Stevens, who is not the bastion of conservative thought, I think, that a lot of people think. But, you know, he wrote an interesting opinion saying, you know, just because maybe an election doesn't go your way or a law might not favor an election doesn't make it illegal. Basically, he was calling, you know, people complain about this law crybabies, but you know, I think it's very hard. I think the burden is on the state to kind of prove that there is this widespread fraud that would necessitate, you know, possibly disenfranchising people.
Well, you know, I did a little research on it. Like, for instance, in 1999, in Texas, they passed a law, right? So, well, let's put it, the stats were 13.5 million eligible voters in Texas. And you know how many of them don't have a picture ID? 1 million of them didn't have a million didn't have a picture ID. So that's 1 million people right off the rolls. And and then guess what? The Attorney General in Texas spent $1.4 million investigating voter fraud, but it didn't find any cases, not one case, of where an ineligible voter impersonated an eligible voter at the polls.
I think in a weird way, part of the problem here goes directly to the money and the super PACs and all that stuff, because I don't know how interested in either party is actually having people vote their conscience. Instead, we vote for whoever's got the most money pumped into the system. And you know, Obama was sort of cornered. They like to say he was cornered into going with the super PACs because Romney was doing it, but Obama did nothing about campaign finance. Right. I know that's a little off topic here, but it's the same kind of thing because it's still all about money and who's going to get the most people to the polls via their cash.
You wanted to say, Alexis?
And, you know, and it's interesting too because I think a lot of the reason why this isn't such more mainstream is because it turns into a finger pointing thing. You know, both sides do it, so you know it balances out. But you know, he had mentioned Colorado, and you know, looking back at the numbers from 2010, there were 12,000 non-citizens registered. 5,000 of them ended up voting. So I do think it's important to look at these rolls, clean them up. But I think it's kind of ironic as well because there's not really a way to get statistics or you know good look at it without knowing who is showing up to vote.
Is there a way to get statistics?
Actually, there is. News 21, which is an investigative project of the Walter Cronkite School of Journalism, they did a comprehensive search of all 50 states, public information requests of all voter fraud records in all 50 states. And they found that in-person voter impersonation, that's the only kind that a photo ID restriction on voting at the polling place, that's the only kind of voter fraud that would be prevented. They found since 2000 exactly 10 cases. 10 out of millions of registered voters, 10 cases of voter impersonation in person. So that's the only kind of voter fraud that would be prevented by these photo ID restrictions. What they did find were 500 absentee ballot fraud cases, and that would be completely unaddressed by photo ID. Yeah, so there's zero effort to try to rein in absentee ballot fraud. So I think you have to look at who is doing this.
Are they dressing up like these people and hats?
Well, it's so ridiculously stupid and completely, it wouldn't accomplish much. You're not able to actually change the results of an election.
Last time I voted, I was behind Michael Jackson. I'm like, I'm pretty sure he's dead.
Yeah.
So that might have been.
But there are many Michael Jacksons.
Let me give you, Alexis. Let me give you the last word on this before we throw to break. Do you have anything else to add?
Again, I think it's a balancing game between making sure that people who are supposed to be voting are voting and.
Okay. I would disagree with that. I would say it's not. I would say it's not a balancing act. I think that this is obviously voter suppression, and the fact that the fourth estate is falling down on the job, and so is the Barack Obama's administration incompetently falling down on the job.
One last thing.
Okay.
I should make sure that this is well known. Paul Weyrich, he's the godfather of the conservative movement. He's also one of the founders of ALEC, the American Legislative Exchange Council. In 1980, you can Google this, Paul Weyrich, he said in front of a seminar, he said, "Our chances in elections go up as the voting populace goes down." This has been a long-term plan to reduce the number of voters that can actually make it to the polls, to make it as hard as possible for legal voters to vote. That's really all this is about.
Voter suppression seems a little anti-American, I will say that. So,
a little, yeah.
And I guess I got the last word on this one. A teeny tiny bit. Okay, so that's, again, another great discussion. And we're going to come back and talk about Condoleezza Rice getting into the Augusta Country Club. All right, we'll be right back. Hi, welcome back to The Point. I'm this week's guest host, Jimmy Dore, and for our final point, we travel to the well-manicured greens of Augusta National Golf Club. Finally, women are going to be welcomed into the ranks of insufferable golf snobs. Isn't that great? Huh? What's next? We're going to have a black leader of the clan. It's all going to happen. I have a feeling. All right. So let's go. We have a video for this, too, a point for this. Let's go to that now.
The Augusta National Golf Club is finally co-ed. 2 female members, including former Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice, are now members. We're talking to Darren Everson. He is one of the Wall Street Journal's sports editors. To ask this burning question, why now?
You know what? It's a great question. And the only thing I can say is that this was never going to be done, as Hootie Johnson famously said, at the point of a bayonet. It was clear that Augusta National was never going to do it on anybody else's timetable. So this was how it was always going to happen, completely out of the blue.
Let's talk about the women they chose to let in, then we'll talk about a few they did not, starting with former Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice. Why her?
A very natural choice. I mean, if you've noticed with Condoleezza Rice, she's a sports nut, and the same goes for Darla Moore as well.
She's the second one. She's a South Carolina financier.
Exactly. Yep. And also her name's on the business school there. So it figures. The one thing, I'm sure that's what your next question was, that's a little surprising, is who they didn't let in.
Exactly.
Primarily the IBM CEO, Virginia Marnetti. And, you know, the question there again is it's the same sort of thing where it's like, that was what we all thought Augusta would have to do, because in the past, the IBM chief executive was always a member.
Because they're a big sponsor.
Exactly. But then they didn't do it this time.
We're looking at her right now. That's, again, Virginia Marnetti. She's the CEO.
Okay. Okay, you know what? And very wisely, we have a couple African Americans on the panel to discuss this. Oh, Gus, we don't have any. All right, so so let me ask the women then. Is this a big deal to how do women see this?
You know, it's kind of anticlimactic. I mean, I think the club gets a better deal out of having, you know, these are very high-profile women. I mean, they're very accomplished. I think it's a great thing, and it's well past its time.
Okay, I agree with that.
Oh, woohoo, the super rich, breaking down barriers for the super rich. That's awesome. Yeah, that's really going to change a lot. Now, actually, I think it actually counts for about less than nothing, personally. But I think it's great PR for Augusta, because now they're back in the news. They're less of an embarrassment than they were before. I don't know if it was kind of cold not to offer it to the IBM CEO who sponsors the tournament, but maybe that was sort of a sop so that they could, you know, say, see, we let in some people. We're not quite the embarrassment nationally that we used to.
Oh, you don't think this signifies that the board of Augusta is completely open-minded and seeing women as equal right now?
No. I know,
really?
It's crazy, but
so
no.
Why do you think they did it then? If it wasn't, let me ask you, why do you think they did it if they're not really actually open-minded?
Well, first off, I'm not a woman. I want to be clear about that.
This is the second time you've mentioned that.
But I just want to say this is the most completely bonkers, ridiculous, absurd thing ever. This topic, because 3 weeks ago, we were considering Condi Rice for VP. She was in the VP discussion. Fast forward 3 weeks, she got into a golf club. Oh, look at her! How about I said "ho" there. I didn't mean.
I know.
That was.
We're gonna cut that out. Don't worry.
Yeah, thank you. But I mean, think about that. Really, we were considering her for VP. That was the talk, and now she got into a golf club, and this is somehow progress.
So why did they do it? Why do you think they did it?
PR.
Totally
It's
PR.
I think it's strictly PR myself.
Do women want to play golf with a bunch of stiff,
apparently,
rich,
well, they say
white
that's
guys?
what. Well,
I don't want to play golf with a bunch of
Condi Rice did them a favor. She is probably, likely, far more accomplished internationally than many of their members, probably most.
I don't think any of the people at Augusta ever were the intermediary to order a war crime. I don't think so. What have they really accomplished? Really, they made green jackets. Go ahead.
No, I mean, I'm a former college athlete, and you know, you look at the Olympics this year. A majority of the women were the ones getting medals, and you know, I think it's great as, you know, a young girl that looks up to that. I think it's great, but yeah, I do think there's political motivations behind it. But it's just kind of like big deal.
But you know, plenty of people on the left were saying this is a bad move to have it be Condi because, you know, she's so associated with Bush and war and blah, blah, blah. But I don't think we can be picking which women can join golf clubs based on their political beliefs. I mean, that's even more absurd.
Yeah, that doesn't make sense.
Well, let's go ahead and throw up this graphic because I haven't put one up yet today, so I figured we should use them. We made them. Let's learn a little bit about Augusta National. So the fact sheet on Augusta is the home of the Masters Golf Tournament. You know how many members? 300. Only 300 members. I didn't know that, right? And you can only get in. You can't apply. Invitation only. accepted the first African-American member? Anybody know? 1990.
Yeah.
Yes, very good. So, because right when Tiger Woods was getting good, they're like, "Hey, we got to let him play here."
They didn't even let a.
Was he the one?
They didn't even let an African American play, I think, until 1975.
Oh, really? But
yes.
they can caddy.
In the Masters.
They caddy,
I should
right?
say in the Masters.
They were definitely caddies.
This is like the tea
Definitely
party of
caddies.
golf courses. What?
You know, that's very disparaging to the Tea Party. Did you know membership? So a membership costs between $10,000 and $30,000 annual, and the dues are estimated to be $10,000 a year. Okay, 83 all caddies at Augusta were black.
Wow.
Well, it was actually a rule. From what I read and what I was
that
looking at, it was
caddies
actually
had
a
to be
rule
black?
by whoever the president was prior to 1990. He said, as long as I live, the golfers will be white and the caddies will be black. There
Isn't
you
that
have it.
nice? I want to get in that club. I can't wait to get in that club. I would not want to be if there was a club that discriminated against mediocre comedians, and they all of a sudden let me in. I would be like, fuck you. I don't want to be in your club.
You know what? I'll go in your club.
Like, all right. I really don't think that I don't think this as a PR move, it doesn't really help them. It just kind of shines a light on how stupid and ridiculous they still are.
Yeah, I think that's the point. I didn't know this until this all came out.
Oh, really?
I
Okay.
didn't realize that women were not allowed. So now they've just brought the light on this absurdity that they've had.
But I still feel, and a part of me feels like you should be able to have a women's club or a men's club. You should. I kind of feel. Do you feel that way a little?
Yeah, I mean, why not? I mean, we have social clubs that are restricted, but
what would be the argument against having that? Is because that's where all the power happens, all the deal making happens, and so women are going to be then shut out from that kind of stuff? Is that what?
Well, that has been something that's been talked about quite a bit as women have entered the workforce and moved up in the corporate ranks. You know, that golf is one of those last bastions where they used to not be able to get in, now they can, and more so. But with Augusta, I think Augusta's different. You know, yes, they're a private club, and yes, as a private club, they can determine who is going to be their members. That's totally fine. But if you're going to be this club that has this gigantic public institutional game, this of pro golf, you know, the pinnacle of pro golf, and you're going to sort of represent America, you know, it seems like it might be nicer for you to actually sort of be in mainstream American thought that women are allowed.
What do you think Condoleezza Rice gets out of this?
I don't think she gets anything. I mean,
no.
she's already a member of some other
Not
real
helping the
super
lesbian
exclusive.
rumors, I'll tell you that.
It's not helping.
No, it absolutely is not
okay.
helping. Golf, you see,
Yeah, I don't really know what she gets out of this either. I mean, she's already in a bigger club than this one. You know what I mean? She was already that. So, all right, well.
I mean, is Bush not letting her? Doesn't he? He must have a golf course somewhere. Why doesn't she go golf with him?
Good point. Yeah.
Go hunt with Cheney. I heard that goes well.
George Bush is busy picking up dog shit, apparently.
Yeah.
That's what from what I've been reading. I don't know.
Busy man.
He's
Yeah.
very busy.
man.
All right, this has been a great panel. Oh, you know what? We're not done. I have to give you guys a chance to plug whatever the heck you guys are doing, right? Okay, so let's start with Alexis Garcia. Alexis Garcia, now what would you like? How can people find you?
they can find me on PJTV.com. Hit me up on Twitter, Alexis PJTV, and also at Fox News Latino.
All right. Wow, it's a lot happening over there. Wow, 3 things happening. Okay, Dave Rubin, we already know about your big time podcast, right? The one of the top comedy podcasts on iTunes.
One of the top ones. So you can go to Six Pack Radio, find out more about that. And we're on SiriusXM, and I am Rubin Report on Twitter.
Oh, Rubin Report. Okay. All
Very
right, gotcha.
professional.
Yes.
Nice.
Desi?
I am at Green News Report on Twitter, and you can also find us at bradblog.com.
Okay, and I want to remind everybody, if you have some feelings that you want to express about today's episode, just go ahead and write it right underneath there. Right, just you type it, and then someone will call you a name. Okay, so I want to thank Greg Palast for submitting his point this week, and then that was it. That's our only point that was submitted. Everybody else, we just kind of ripped off the video. All right, that's it for this week. Thanks for watching. Until next week, I'm Jimmy Dore. Check us out on The Point.